Hello and welcome to our 34th Holding Space for Self and Others webinar series. It's lovely to have you here today, whether you're joining us live or whether you're watching this recording a little bit later on. My name is Jackie Short. I'm the Director of Sydney Centre for Creative Change, and I'd like to welcome everybody here to this wonderful presentation we have today on sacred storytelling, teaching children reflective thinking. Carolyn Handley, who I'll introduce you to in just a moment. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands that I come to you from today, the Eora people of the Gadigal Nation, and pay our collective respects to elders past, present and emerging. Just a couple of screens to introduce you to what we're doing today, and I'll come back and share some of these a little bit later on. So to welcome and to introduce Carolyn to you, I'd like to tell you that she's a transformational coach, spiritual director, retreat leader, deep talk storyteller, sacred storyteller, and trainer who lives in Sydney. Her passion is helping women and children blossom as they experience the transformation which comes from being accepted as they are and from growing self-compassion, trust and self-respect, gaining self-awareness, finding their voice, and being affirmed as they explore their insights. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Carolyn to you.
Hi everybody, and welcome to our sacred storytelling session. I'll just share my screen just for a couple of slides just to introduce our subject. Can you see that? Yes. So why sacred storytelling? As human beings, we're wired to love to tell and listen to stories. If I said to you, would you like me to tell you a story? Would you say, oh no, I'm busy? Or would you be interested? It always piques our curiosity, doesn't it? And not only storytelling, but I love to actually think about things reflectively, because stories have a lesson to tell us, or an idea or an inspiration, if we actually open ourselves up to the possibilities and listen to that. Sacred stories can also point to existential questions, and we'll talk about that a bit more after we do a demo. And as a Christian myself, this approach helps me to really make connections between the story and my life. And that's what the reflective process is aiming to do, is to take wisdom from sacred stories from all different traditions, or in a thing called godly play, specifically in the Christian tradition, and to apply that to our lives. Oops. So today the session is basically going to be this brief introduction. You're going to experience a godly play storytelling session. So the introduction will be based on Out of the Box, which is a secular sacred storytelling technique. And the story itself is a godly play story, which is a Christian tradition, because I wanted to do a case study afterwards on this story, and it'll just give you, it's a funny little story, but it's actually quite powerful when we talk about it afterwards. So I hope you enjoy that. Then we'll look at 3 underlying principles and 3 brief case studies. Then there's breakout rooms to chat about it, and there'll be Q&A at the end. So if you do have questions, please hold them till the end. But do write them down. Look, this is me. I just thought I'd introduce, because I don't know very many of you at all. I did a Bachelor of Science degree in Honours in Psychology. I've done a Master of Arts in Theological Studies. I'm a godly play storyteller and trainer, spiritual director, retreat leader, narrative coach. I do life coaching, but narrative coaching is all about stories. I think I'm all about stories and reflection. So that's me, and founder and director of My Joyful Life. So I tell stories. I was a children and family worker, 20 years ago, and I started telling stories to children on the floor. This is me with my preschool group. My favourite age to tell these stories to is 3 to 5 year olds, because they're pre-moral thinking, so they're just open to possibilities. They're just like little sponges, and they soak up what you're offering, and it's just so beautiful to work with them and teach them all about love and possibilities. But now I'm actually doing a whole lot of retreats. So here you can see me last year doing a retreat covidly spaced with adults. So godly play is really for, I would say, 2 to 102, 2 to 3, they really struggle to sit still, maybe 3 to 103, something like that. So all ages, as soon as you can sit still enough to hear the story. So are you ready for a sacred story experience? As we come to this experience, I just invite you to come to it as an adult for yourself. What I'd really like to offer is a story that you can enjoy and just enter it for yourself. Take off the hat of how am I going to apply this? Take off the hat of do I agree with this? Take off the hat of why are we doing this weird story anyway? If you can just let all of that go for a minute, jump into the story, just enjoy it as a gift to you, because it's only when we fill our own cup and have an experience, from that experience we can offer something or think about it in a different way. There will be time afterwards to put your hat back on and go, how will I apply this? Is it relevant? Do I care? What's it saying to me? How does it inspire me or not? What does it even mean afterwards? So are you happy to just stay in the story and keep it for you as an adult right now? I hope so. Okay, so let's swap screen. I'll just stop this screen share and I'll invite Vanita to swap to this screen, and let's have a story. So, are you ready for a story? Can you see this? This story is in a gold box. And gold is precious, so it could be a precious story, and it could be quite old. But now we have time and space to breathe. So let's just take some deep breaths. Let's calm ourselves down, slow our breaths, and get ready for a story. My story, your story, our story. Let's get curious about this story. Wonder what might be in this box. Shall we have a look? There's this. Wonder what it could be. And we've got these things. Wonder what that could be. Well, could go like that. Maybe it's a C. That's my name. Maybe this is about me. I wonder. There's another one. There's quite a few of these things. Oh, and we've got a bed. Got a table. We might put the table here. Some bags of money. A chair. Chest. Table. It's a lamp to put on the table. There's a jug. There's a person. And another person. Oh, we have this. Wonder what this is. All right, I think we're ready to start our story. There was once someone who said such amazing things and did such wonderful things that people followed him. As they followed him, they kept hearing him talk about this kingdom of God. Well, they didn't know what the kingdom of God was. They'd never heard about it. They didn't know how to get there. They didn't even know anyone who'd ever been there before. What was this strange kingdom? So one day they had to ask him, Who is this kingdom? Where is this kingdom of God? Tell us about it. And he said, the kingdom of God is like a merchant, a person who went to buy and sell precious pearls, who went in search of the great pearl. And when they found the great pearl, they went. They went and exchanged everything for the great pearl. Now, I wonder what this person feels like with their great pearl. If you would like to, you can unmute and call out answers. But if you want to just wonder by yourself silently, I know that you're still wondering. I can feel the wonder. But if you'd like to share your answers out loud, that's lovely too, because then we can inspire one another. So in this brief little bit of wondering, you are invited, if you want to unmute and call out. So I wonder how this person feels now that they have this great pearl.
In awe that he's holding it.
Awe. In awe that he's holding it.
Cold, because he has no home.
Oh, cold. He's got no home. He might feel cold.
Lonely.
Sorry, there were two at once there.
Lonely.
Lonely. Yes, lonely.
Unburdened.
Unburdened. Yes.
Full of potential.
Oh, full of potential. Yes, I wonder what this offers now. I wonder what the potential is.
Pearl of wisdom.
Pearl of wisdom. Yes. I wonder how this person feels with all this stuff.
Greediness.
Greediness.
Overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed, yes.
Blessed.
Blessed. Yes. I wonder what this pearl could really be.
Self.
Self.
A symbol.
Symbol. Yeah. Symbol.
Freedom.
Freedom.
The meaning of life and the connection to God as well.
The meaning of life and the connection to God. Wonderful. I wonder if anything in this story reminds you of something.
When you brought out the table and the chairs, I thought you were going to bring out the Last Supper.
Ah, yes, reminded you of the Last Supper with the table and the chairs. Yeah.
Reminds me of people who buy things online and have them delivered.
Oh, the delivery just kept coming.
It reminded me of my life journey, which is unburdening myself of lots of things to find the self. And that's why I call it the self.
Yes, unburdening to find yourself.
The different shapes, the square shapes reminded me of the House of Good Things, the House of Wishes, House of Worries. I thought you were going to do something along those lines.
Ah, maybe we could do that next time. Yeah.
It reminded me when you took the shape away from the merchant, let's say. It reminded me of letting go of our identity. So giving everything of who we are over to have something truthful and pure.
Yes, letting go of the identity. Something truthful and pure. Yeah, wonderful. Wonderful. So I wonder what this whole place could really be. And I wonder what this whole story is really all about for you.
About life.
About life. About life.
It could be aspects of our life. One could be your family, one could be your professional, one could be, whatever.
Yes.
Family.
Yeah. Aspects of your life. Wonderful.
That we can hold what's special in our hands.
Can hold what's special in our hands.
Maybe to find what has true worth for us.
Yes. What is something of worth, true worth for you? We could keep on wondering about this story all day. And actually, I think I might. I hope that you do. But right now, it's time to pack the story up. And then if we were in a room together physically, I would have art materials, I would have the story materials available for you to keep thinking and reflecting on the story by using those materials. But I'm going to invite you to imagine. So imagine that now, as I pack this up, there's a room full of craft materials of your imagination and these story pieces. And imagine, what would you like to do in a minute when I give you a few minutes just to work with this story or whatever comes up for you in this story? You might like to write something, draw something, paint something, model something, or play with the pieces. So I just invite you to start wondering about how you'd like to work with this a bit more in your imagination while I pack it away. So we have the great pearl and the other pearls. We have the merchant who went in search of the great pearl, and the other person who sold him the great pearl. And all of these things we have these places. And this whole place on which it happened. And the gold box in which it all came from. I'm just going to change back to the other screen. I wonder if you would just like to take literally 30 seconds and just imagine yourself. You might like to close your eyes or just stare at the table away from the screen and just imagine yourself reflecting in some way on this story. What would you like to do? Are you writing something, drawing something? Just imagine what you'd like to do. There's never enough time in these sessions to do the full art response, is there? And I've really given you less than a minute, which is really unfair. But this is just a taster. This is the sort of thing that you might like to do with children that you work with adults, with groups, with individuals. And it gives you a taste of the frustration of not having enough time, because I was given only a short time for this whole session. So I invite you to come back to the screen. If you're unmuted, if you could mute yourself, or maybe Vanita can mute everyone except me. And now it's time for now it's time for our feast. So I wonder if did you bring some food? I just brought a couple of grapes and some water. Did you bring a feast? When we're meeting together in the room, then we have a feast together. And this is a time when we share news. We might share how we are. We might share something about what's happening in our world, in our life. With children, if they could, keep from telling you earlier, which they normally can't, they might tell you about something that their puppy dog's been doing, or their family, or the latest place they've been to, or whatever their news is. It's a time of listening. The research that Rebecca Nye did said that nearly every child that she spoke to, she said it was pretty close to 100% of children that she researched in public and private schools in England, said that adults did not spend enough time listening to them. And I think that's tragic. So this is a time when we listen. So we'll just have a moment to, I invite you to have, if you brought food and drink, to have it. I might keep going because of, as I said, I didn't get very much. This is a short session. So I might keep going, but I do invite you to sharing food and drink together. After we feast together, the last thing we do is to bless, is a blessing. And the blessing that I normally give to, especially to children, is just to look them in the eye. I might, when they come in the room, I actually put my hands out and they can come up to me. They might just bow their head, they might grab my hands, they might give me a big hug and try and push me into the stories behind me, depending on their personality and culture. And I just say, I name them. So Jackie, it was so wonderful to see you today. Thank you for coming, and I look forward to seeing you next time. And that's the simple blessing that I give to each child one-on-one as they leave. If it's a big classroom, then I might do a song or a blessing for the whole group. So let me share my screen again. And we'll just have a quick look at the underlying principles of this storytelling. So brief history, this storytelling technique started out with Montessori in Italy. It was adapted by Jerome Berriman, who was a priest in America, and created the approach that's now called godly play. That was taken up by a godly play trainer in Finland and turned into a thing called Deep Talk, which is an approach for adults and group work. And more recently, Out of the Box is still in development, but it's being used and developed out of England. And that's a secular approach. And it's going beyond sacred stories to include other things as well. the lady who's started Out of the Box has a science background, so she even wants STEM and all sorts of subjects included. But anyway, that's another story. So the underlying principles in all of these sacred storytelling techniques is, number one is affirmation. So if you think back to when we told the story, I tried to give equal positive response to every single answer, because there are no wrong answers in these sacred storytelling techniques. Every answer is correct. Even if a child gives a really provocative answer, they're just testing to see what your response will be, and the response that I encourage and that is at the heart of this whole approach is always to be positive and affirming. And secondly, safe community. So these stories are generally told in a group. The case studies, 2 of the case studies I'll tell you about were done in family groups as part of family therapy. But they're also done just in circles, like I showed you in the photo. It might be a retreat of adults, it might be a circle of children, a weekly program, something like that. And so you want to create a safe community. And so we never laugh at anyone's answers. We always affirm them as valuable. Generous hospitality. If you were in the room, then I would have some fresh fruit and water, something like that, to share as a snack, making sure that it's safe for everyone in terms of allergies. But we want to make the food delicious and healthy and very simple. With a preschool workshop that I used to run, we just had a rice cracker and water. And yet the children were so excited about having their feast together, and they would carefully count out how many rice crackers they would get, which would normally be 3. And we would have a wonderful feast together with our 3 rice crackers. A colleague of mine in England, he said that he was doing this with teenagers on retreat. And so they got 1 rice cracker each. And he said, yes, this is a feast. I know it's just a rice cracker, but imagine it would be a feast. What would a feast be like? What would it be like if it was your feast? And some said roasts, and some said pizza, and some said all sorts of things, and chocolate cake. And so they made their feast in their imagination as they ate their rice cracker. Wondering. So wondering is the key to unlocking the thinking about possibilities. I love wondering. Since I started doing this storytelling technique back in 2003, so it's 19 years ago, I have wondered about more and more things in my life, and it just opens you up to seeing all sorts of possibilities that you don't see. And for children, to help them to see and reflect, it helps them to get unstuck and moving in whatever way might be helpful to them. Sacred space, we just create a space for children which is clean and orderly, and as many natural materials as possible. There's lots of bright plastic, and if you go into some classrooms today, there's just signs and bright posters everywhere, and it's very overwhelming. And we try and make our spaces with sacred stories very simple and natural. Process over product. I think many of you are doing art therapy, and if you're doing that, you know all about this. But there is, if we have a child and they're doing their work, like you just did your mini creative response in your imagination, they might come and show it to you. So if they show you a picture, you don't say, oh, that's beautiful. Because what if it's not beautiful? What if it's something very traumatic that this child is working through? You don't really know what it is. So what we say is, oh, something like, wow, there's a lot of blue. Would you like to tell me about that? And it's always invitational, and it's always just saying what we see without actually trying to make any value judgment. And definitely never. It's the thing that if you say it's beautiful, they immediately start trying to please you. And we really don't want to do that. But this is their work for them to help them reflect and process in a way that children through story and through playing, that's how they process. So that's what we want to free them up to do. The less compliments they get, the more they can actually go in and listen to their own heart. Silence. Silence is actually a member of the group. In Godly Play, Jerome even says that silence is one of the 4 genres of storytelling, because it's so important, and in our noisy, busy world, there is not enough silence. We all crave silence, even if we also struggle with it. And finally, trust the process. I think that's just the process that the child, the adult, will get whatever out of the story that they need in that session. I could talk about this all day, and I do run 3-day training with a colleague, so this is my very, very, very brief summary. But I'd like to jump straight into some case studies. And the first one is from the story The Great Pearl that you heard today, and that's why I showed it to you. There's a fellow called Ryan Campbell who works with children who have very extreme problems in, I'm just looking up the name of his hospital, in Dallas Hospital in Texas. He's a chaplain. And he works with children with eating disorders. So this case study was a girl who was 12 years old, and she had an extreme eating disorder. She was in family therapy, and as part of the family therapy, when they got to the chaplain telling this story, this actually became the turning point in her therapy. So she looked at this story, and then when he wondered, I wonder what the great pearl could be, she said, that's my eating disorder. So with the support of her family who heard her say this, she gradually realized what she was doing to herself, started eating more healthily, and eventually she was fully, had a full recovery from her eating disorder, with this story being the turning point. So I think that's just so exciting and so powerful, and I wish that people were doing this all around the world and not just in this little place in Texas. But I just love that. I'm sad that children 12 years old have eating disorders, but I love that this story was so powerful in helping this girl. Case study number 2, terminally ill children. The founder of Godly Play, Jerome Berriman, had a daughter with spina bifida, so he was in and out of hospitals a lot, and he became a hospital chaplain as well as being a priest, probably because he was spending so much time in hospitals with her. He took on the story of the Good Shepherd from a lady, Sofia Cavalletti, in Italy, who had developed it. And this story is a really powerful story. It's about the Good Shepherd guides the sheep. He knows them each by name. He takes them to green grass and refreshing water. And when there's dangerous places, he helps them to get through. And then we show a sheep getting lost, and the Good Shepherd going everywhere looking for the lost sheep and carrying it home to the sheepfold on his shoulders. I apologise for the not ironed demo. I just last night thought I'd give you a quick little picture of some of the pieces. So that's not very pretty, but anyway, that's my quickly throwing together picture of the story. So what they discovered was that children know that they're dying in these situations. They know that they're so sick, and the parents know, but they really don't want to upset each other, and they don't want to talk about it because they don't want to upset each other. But through this story, what they discovered was that it gave the family and the children, being told the story all together using sterile hospital materials, a language to talk about being in dangerous places, being, and dying and being stuck and being cared for and loving even though they're losing. And all these conversations could happen through the characters in the story, which they couldn't do directly. And what they discovered was that the families that actually had received this story and talked about it together coped a lot better with the really heartbreaking situation of losing a child, and the child coped better too than the families that didn't receive that story. Final little story was a boy that I had the privilege of knowing. I was actually knew his mum, and his father died around about his 8th birthday. So it got to his 9th birthday, and I just felt very moved to make this boy this story of the Good Shepherd. I made him the gold box, like his bit like the one you saw today, and all the pieces of the story, and I took it to his place. Now, he hadn't been coming to church. His father had been quite sick, and there'd been various issues, so he wasn't used to this approach, but I took the gold box to him as his 9th birthday present. Sat on the floor in the lounge room, told him the story. The mother watched from the couch. I told him the story, and then I said to him, well, after these stories, usually I invite children. They might draw something, they might write something, they might work or play with the actual story pieces, or they might tell the story. And he said, oh, I'd like to tell you the story. So he told me the whole story back, word for word, exactly as I had told it to him, all the movements of all the pieces. It was amazing. Incredible memories of these young people. And that night in the bath, he said to his mother, Mum, I've been thinking the Good Shepherd, that might be Jesus. And the mother, trying to be wondering and non-directive, said, so if the Good Shepherd was Jesus, who would the sheep be? And he went, oh, that would be like his friends, like the disciples. And she said, would you like to ring Carolyn and tell her about that? She'd love to hear your idea. And he said, oh no, I wouldn't want to. Carolyn wonders many things. I wouldn't want to disillusion her. So that night, oh, one more thing. When I was telling that story, when I got to the question, I wonder if the sheep have names. And he pointed to the sheep that had been lost in the dangerous places. And he said his own name. And I went, ooh, that's these funny questions. That's why that's there. It was a real moment of aha for him and for me. So that night he got into bed. He took the piece, which was the Good Shepherd, and he put it on his pillow right next to his head. And he got the green grass, the felt, and put it over his blanket, and he tried to sleep in his own bed by himself without his mum for the first time since his father had died. He didn't last the whole night, but it was a beautiful step in his grieving and letting go. So that's my very rapid introduction to Godly Play Deep Talk out of the box. If you'd like to learn more about this storytelling technique, you will get these PowerPoint slides, and so you don't have to write all this down. It will be on the handout on the PowerPoint slides that you'll get, won't it, Jackie? Yes. So there's the Godly Play is the one from a Christian context, and godlyplay.com.au is our local website, and there's a Facebook page with lots of things if you've got questions. If you're ready to jump in, there's a training in Melbourne in 2 weeks' time that has some spaces. Just doing a specific plug for that. I'm not doing the Melbourne or Sydney this time. I am doing the Sunshine Coast training in July. If you need a bit more time to get ready or a new financial year budget or whatever, I'm sure we can organise some PD points for you for that. If we're not part of a particular organisation, but we can work with you on that if you need help with that. Yes, if you're interested in learning more about that, if you're interested in a variety of traditions or a secular approach, Out of the Box training.org is the website for that, and the next training that's totally online, and it starts on the 1st of August. So that's to learn more, and that's me. All the contacts if you want to connect with me in any way. I've got a Facebook page, Facebook group, website, and I'm just launching my next program, which is Calm, Clear and Confident, which is helping stressed out women with triggers. It might be social anxiety, it might be a particular person or a particular challenge like public speaking that sets you off. So I'm helping people to overcome their triggers in this program, Calm, Clear and Confident. If you know anyone who has triggers and wants to be helped with that, that would be great to get to know them. So I'd like to leave you with the question, I wonder what you'll do with this. I wonder what you will do. Will it be a nice morning that was interesting, or will you actually do something with it? And with that question, I shall stop sharing my screen and hand back to Jackie, who's going to put us in some breakout rooms. Thank you, Jackie, for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Caroline. I think that's a perfect question to launch into a breakout room discussion with. Anyone like to share anything that you discussed in your group? Be nice to reconnect in that way. Maybe just give us a wave, and Benita and I will look out and invite you to unmute. Judy, is that a wave? Yep. Thanks.
Yeah, I don't mind sharing because I'm an art therapist. Of course, I had to get art materials out in my 1 minute. And I did a very quick little drawing of the sort of the schema. And I was thinking about all the different, like for me, little parts of your life. And then I was sort of just randomly colouring while we were chatting, and I had two lovely, very engaging, I'm just, colouring. And then I realised I'd left an empty space for the original. And then I had no idea that there was still an empty space there. So it's sort of like we had a minute, and, like you can, I think the power of this is that it can go in so many directions. So I feel quite inspired. Thank you, Carolyn.
Wonderful. Thanks, Judy, for those reflections too. Amazing what we can do in just 1 minute. Good reminder of that too. Thanks, Judy. Anybody else want to reflect or share? Oh, Kitty, would you like to share? Thanks, Vanessa.
Oh, hello. So we, our group was talking about what is the sort of literature and research behind it, and if we can get like a link to some of them. And we also noticed that there was a script for stories. So we're just wondering if there's like a standardized like amount of stories that you do tell in these therapies, and what sort of themes do they link to? So yeah, that was what we were.
Great questions there. So thanks, Kitty. We might ask Carolyn, in fact, that question, if you don't mind jumping in straight away, Carolyn, in response to that.
Sure, that was a lot of questions, Kitty, so you might have to remind me of what the first one was. But yes, Godly Play has a number of books, volume 1 to 8, but about 5 of those 8 books are scripts of stories. So there's about 12 stories in each book. And they cover, basically, because Godly Plays from a Christian perspective, they cover Bible stories. There's 10 stories which take you all the way through the whole Old Testament, which is amazing because it's big leaps. There's parables, and there's sacred stories, which is liturgical stories, which is more like our faith practices. Deep Talk has a whole lot of stories as well, and I'm not sure if there's a particular structure to the Deep Talk stories, but they're wisdom stories from Christian, Buddhist, Jewish, and secular fables. The Out of the Box has wisdom stories, but they're talking now about history, and they're developing stories at the moment. So Out of the Box is very much becoming something. It's in development. So it, again, if you join that, there's 49 wisdom stories that you'll get access to with a number of different themes. In terms of the research, I think was the first question. Probably the best way to get started on that is to actually look at the Godly Play website. The Australian one, the UK one has a whole lot of resources attached to it, and that's got some great papers. The UK one, I'm not sure how much research is attached to their website. I haven't looked at it recently, but start with the websites of the different places, but also talk to me or come to a training and find out more that way. I hope that answers those questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Caroline. Are there any other questions for Caroline, or any other reflections or comments you'd like to make about your experience of doing this? Feel free to pop any questions you might have in the chat as well. So another way to reach out, Elise, yeah.
Sorry, I just want to jump in there. I just wanted to say I really appreciate that there's a Christian influence coming through, and it's not, when we do come to these courses, it's not strictly one way or another. It was really nice to have that point of difference.
Oh, lovely. Thanks, Elise, for those comments. Fantastic. Any other questions, comments, thoughts you'd like to share?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I found it really nostalgic. Like, it called back to the way that you played when you were a little kid and had things that weren't screens. We were talking about felt boards and things like that in our group. And yeah, it almost made me want to, play with it and, yeah, do art responses to it.
Rebecca, can I just invite you to actually listen to that little voice inside and actually do the art response? Don't just feel like it, but really act on that. There's a weekend coming up.
Thanks, Caroline. Thanks, Rebecca. Do it. Any other reflections, questions, or thoughts?
Yeah, I'm happy to say something. I think that we shouldn't let that kid inside of us die. We should always use that. I was mentioning in the group that I am a bilingual storyteller and that I come from a multi-faith background. And so I perform to refugee children and newly arrived migrants. And I use comedy as my way to help children with their trauma. And once I give them a half an hour time frame, they can do whatever they want. They can use art or what have you. And it's funny because afterwards they come and unload their stories to me. And I also work with domestic violence on the side. And so it's because of that and with storytelling that I want to start a career in counseling. And I love that, Carolyn, you brought that attention, that it doesn't matter if you use the Christian faith base of play therapy, because the way a child heals and grieves, it helps them when they're young because they don't have to address that issue later on in life. they have you to thank you for that, because yeah, and I wish more people use creative arts and therapy in health, because it's really beneficial, and I wish the schooling system would do that as well.
Thanks, Jasmine, for those great reflections. If you're interested in creative therapies, you're definitely in the right space here. So we're really glad you could come and share that, and keep up the wonderful work you're doing in your communities with such valuable ways of connecting and helping people express what's important to be able to resolve and work through. So well done. Thank you all for being here today, and thank you. If I could get everyone to give Carolyn a lovely big virtual round of applause and appreciation for that great presentation and facilitated exercise. It was really very powerful. We've got a couple more things to do before we finish up in about 5 or 10 minutes, including giving you the link to the quiz and the PD certificate that I know some of you are particularly wanting for your professional associations. Just wanted to let you know a couple of things that we have coming up. We had a nice opportunity here to connect in, and now what I would like to do is show you some of our other events that we have, including the next couple of free ones also. We have a 3-hour workshop coming up on the 5th of May with Beate Stella, who's a clinical social worker, and she's doing a wonderful interactive workshop on supporting grieving adults. So if you're interested in that, you can register online. We've also got a 3-day training coming up with Dr. Robert Grant, who's coming into us from Minnesota. He's doing this 3-day training in alt play therapy. So if you're working with children on the spectrum or who have other neurodiversities, this is a very interactive and play-based therapy training program, particularly for those children. We also have the first time Sue's running this for us. It's a 3-hour in the evening workshop. It's also going to be interactive using messy play and really exploring infant mental health. So that'll be another fabulous workshop if you're interested in doing that interactively online with us. And very close to my heart, I'm coordinating a PD event coming up on the 14th of May. It's a 3-hour training. It will be recorded, and people who register beforehand will be able to have access to the recording. We have 4 international presenters who are going to be presenting on helping children, families and communities manage trauma through storytelling, through play therapy and through art therapy. And all the money that is raised from this fundraising, everyone's donating their time for free, will go directly to one of our presenters, Katerina Bolshakova, who's a psychologist and artist who's currently still living in the Ukraine and doing a lot of charity and volunteer work. So we're really hoping to raise some funds for her, but we're really also wanting to offer you a quality PD interactive presentation. So I hope that some of you might be able to support us in that, in attending that. Our next free event is going to be next month, same time, 11 to 12:15, Building Secure Attachments with Babies, Learning 3 States of Infant Behaviour. I know many of you have already registered. We do have some places left for that, should you be interested. We've also got some other great presentations coming up in the coming months. So we do these free events monthly. So do share the registration link with your colleagues and friends if you know of others who might be interested. And we have only over 30 recordings of these available online on our website if you wanted to have a look at those as well. So I would like to give somebody now a free one of our $50 webinars. This is one I'm delivering on the 10th of May. And it's around sand tray therapy, which is not just for children. So if you're working with children, adolescents or adults, you might find some benefit in attending this. So I would love to see one of you there if you're able to attend this. And if you're not able to attend it, but you'd like to gift this to somebody else, feel free to do that also. So in order to be able to win this, you need to be able to think of a story that has been sacred for you. And it could be any story. It could be a parable story. It could be a religious story. It could be a secular story. It could be a story in a book on a shelf that's sitting with arm's reach for you at the moment. So if you, the first person to write done in the chat and who is happy to unmute and share what one of their sacred stories might be, will win this webinar. So we're going to be looking out for, oh, there's lots of dones coming through. Fantastic. Lots of people keen to win and lots of sacred stories we've all been influenced by, no doubt. But Jennifer, would you like to unmute? You were the very first one there. Well done. Would you like to share one of your sacred stories?
Yes, actually, I just read it recently, and it was very moving. It was about, as some of you may have heard it, it's about a young girl who had a blood disorder, and she needed a match for her treatment, and they looked high and low and couldn't find a match. And then one day they just tested her younger brother, and they found that he was a match. And they said to the little boy, look, this is the situation. Would you be willing to give your blood to your sister? And he said, look, I just need some time to think about this. He went away, and the next day the specialist came and talked with him, and he said, have you made your decision? And he said, yes, I have. I'm going to do it. And then they set up the time, and the brother wanted to be next to his sister during this treatment. So they were next to each other looking at, and blood was going in, and within half an hour, she gained all her colour back into her face. And she felt, and the family felt, exuberant. And then her brother signalled the specialist over to talk to him and said to him, could you just tell me something, please? Will I die slowly or will it be quickly? It's so moving, and, you know, how much love, how do we express our love, and in what way? Well, it's very moving for me. Still, even telling the story is moving.
Beautifully told, Jennifer. Thank you for sharing that story. That's really, you certainly are deserving in the sharing of that story for this webinar. I'll send you the link about how you can access that later on today.
Thank you.
Beautiful story about sacrifice and what we're prepared to do for others. Yeah, just absolutely lovely. Thank you for being here, and thank you again, Caroline, for such a dynamic and an interactive presentation. It was very inspiring.
And Jackie, thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, it was really wonderful.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.